Hello BookTube and welcome to Weekly Reads. This week has been dedicated exclusively to Conan the Sumerian, and namely the short stories featuring Conan the Sumerian written by Robert E. Howard. I have the complete stories in 3 volumes. There's also a single volume that I think Galance put out around the same time as the Del Rey 3 volumes, and I don't remember who the British publisher is, but I'm going to show them real quick. The volumes, anyway. So, first is The Coming of Conan the Sumerian. The second is actually The Bloody Crown of Conan. And the third and final volume is The Conquering Sword of Conan. I actually gotten the second and third volumes mixed up last week and in general. So, I will admit one mistake in my choice of reading material this week, and that was to binge on Conan. Wasn't necessarily a bad reading experience. It was just reading all of the Conan stories by Robert E. Howard in one go. Highlighted some of Howard's flaws as a writer. Now, the thing that Robert E. Howard is famous for is this visceral quality that he achieves in his style. This sort of maybe frenetic pace that he has. But it's tempered or hampered sometimes by overly elevated prose, even though that was typical of the genre during that period and even into the present. But I think what was more grating was the recycling of plots. In this volume, The Coming of Conan the Sumerian, you have in very quick order Iron Shadows in the Moon, or Shadows in the Moonlight, The Pull of the Black One, and The Devil in Iron. And all 3 of those stories are incredibly similar in plot structure. Conan comes upon an island after being chased in 2 of the stories by very similar characters, and also associated with 2 very similar love interests. And on this island, there's mysterious ruins of a lost civilization, which isn't quite so lost. And a similar recycling of plot goes on through a lot of the stories. I mean, Hour of the Dragon is basically an extension of the Scarlet Citadel, so on and so forth. And I mean, Howard's not the only writer to recycle plots. Agatha Christie is also quite famous for recycling her plots. I mean, it's not necessarily like exactly the same. I mean, there are some variations to it, but if you read them all in one go, you notice it more and it becomes a bit grating. So maybe I should have read these a story a week or something like that, rather than all in one binge. But anyway, so for the most, so I enjoyed coming back to Conan. It's been quite a while since I've read most of these stories. I read The Tower of the Elephant last year in a Sword and Sorcery anthology, and then I think it's been probably 10 years or more since the last time I really made an effort to read these stories, and that was in the big single volume edition that my library has. And then slowly after um, having read all of the stories in that edition, I found um, these volumes at Golden Book Exchange. I used to have at least two of the volumes, but I ended up trading them in or donating them, and then regretting it and eventually picking them back up. But anyway, so what I want to do is talk about some of my favorite stories rather than all of them. So, of my top 5 Conan stories, I would say, in no particular order. I'm listing them in the order that they appear in these editions. The Tower of the Elephant is one of the quintessential Conan stories. It's about a young Conan who is interested in this mysterious Tower of the Elephant, and after being mocked in a bar, or the equivalent of a bar, he decides to go and steal the heart of the elephant. And what follows is a rather surprising adventure, especially this the conclusion where the standard sort of approach to the other, the monstrous, is subverted, and subverted in a wonderful way that you don't often see in sword and sorcery or fantasy in general. The next story I really like is the Scarlet Citadel, and that mostly this one is later in Conan's career. He's matured as a character, matured as human, and he's king of Aquilonia. And as in pretty much all of the King Conan stories, his throne is under threat. And in this story, he is confronted, he's opposed by one wizard, aided by another, and I love both Sasalanti and Pelias. They are incredible characters. And there's, of course, the Scarlet Citadel itself, and the chapters set in the Scarlet Citadel are just amazing. The third story is Queen of the Black Coast, which I love largely for the character of Belit and the tragedy that Conan and Belit's love story produces. It is just one amazing story. The next favorite, number 4, Red Nails. I like it for very similar reasons to Queen of the Black Coast. It has a very strong female supporting character in Valeria. It's also incredibly tragic in its commentary on civilization. And then the fifth story I really like is The People of the Black Circle, in which Conan is a leader of a tribe of Afghulis who basically Hyborian Afghans or Pashtuns, and they are currently having some difficulties with Vinhia, which is the proto-India of the setting, and this conflict is rooted in the assassination of the king of Vinhia by a group of sorcerers called the Black Seers, or the Seers of Yimsha. And I especially like this story in part because it does go into the magic system of the Hyborian Age and the Conan stories in greater detail than you normally get. And I also really like it because of the character of Kimsa, who is a sorcerer who starts the story as working for, he's a member of an acolyte of the Seers of Yimsha, but then he strikes out on his own. And his story is really incredible. And in case because I think I forgot, yeah, I did, talk about the rough plot outline of Ridnell's. Basically, Valeria, she's a pirate, and she, for some reason, is deciding to try her hand at land-based mercenary work. So she's serving in the Stygian army on the borders, and she is the victim of an attempted rape in which she kills her attempted rapist and flees. And Conan goes in pursuit of her because he's attracted to her too. They encounter each other, and after some conflict, they eventually decide to work together, and they go to this mysterious city where it's incredibly horrifying city, and tragic. So yeah. Anyway, so that's pretty much what I've been reading this whole week. I do want to talk about the art in these volumes because they are fully illustrated. Let me see if I can find one. Like, this here is from Roads in the House. So the illustrator of Volume 1 is Mark Schultz, and some of these are pretty good, but then there's the stories in which Conan is a teenager. He's in his late teens or early 20s. I have some issues with the artwork. Conan looks far too old to be for the scene. And that's my one criticism of Schultz's work. I really like the one in Gary Gianni's illustrations in Volume 2 in The Bloody Crown of Conan. Especially there's find it real quick. A very famous scene from A Witch Shall Be Born, which, if you've seen the 1982 Conan the Barbarian movie, you will recognize. As is Conan being crucified. And the third volume, The Conquering Sword of Conan, whose illustrator is Gregory Manchis, I quite liked it too, although there's some though it's a bit mixed. So I quite like these actually. I can find one that's not too. Yeah, this one is of Conan and Valeria fleeing the dragon. I quite like it, although maybe some of the costuming might be a bit problematic. The world building of the Hyborian Age is basically everything, including the proverbial kitchen sink. So, yeah. So, I quite enjoyed revisiting the Conan stories. I'm kind of thinking of in April or May, if I have the time and other book buying commitments or desires don't intercede, I'm thinking seriously of picking up the Solomon Kane collection and the Cole collection. And I'd also like to pick up the horror stories. And there's also this one, it's I think it's called the Call of Cthulhu, which it collects the Lovecraft inspired or Cthulhu mythos inspired stories that Howard wrote. Which doesn't include any Conan stories, but it does include like Worms of the Earth and a Cole story and stuff that I quite liked it, but also some ways a bit repelled by it. I mean, there's this one story, I think it's Children of the Night or something. It's it's set in roughly the early 20th century in a college, and it's a group of students who are talking with this famous professor, and one of the students gets knocked on the head by this mysterious artifact, and then he dreams of a past life in which his group of humans are sort of engaged in a war with the people who would eventually probably become the worms of the earth in the Bran McMorran story. And when he wakes up, he kind of accuses one of the other people in the room of being a descendant of these sort of people, and it is just, I'm not entirely sure if Howard is trying to be sort of subverting the kind of Lovecraft racism or is fully engaging in it, but it is just like, oh Lord, it's so bad or so just skeevy. But anyway, so I don't know. We'll see. I mean, that particular edition is wildly expensive so far that I've seen. And we'll see. So next week, or starting tomorrow, or like the weekend, I'm planning on reading The Husband Hunters by Anne de Courcy. This is a history about American heiresses marrying into the British aristocracy. And then over the course of the work week, I'm planning on finally getting to Iron Curtain by Anne Applebaum. This is about the Soviet domination of Eastern Europe after World War II. And yeah, so that's my plans for next week. And if you're curious about COVID vaccinations, my mom went Monday to get her COVID shot. She got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine at the local grocery store. And we had some difficulty getting there. I don't drive, and my mom can't drive. So we had to have my brother take us, and he's super obsessed about COVID and not getting out of the house. So it took some convincing to convince him to take us, but he did. And then, of course, the next day he went and got his COVID vaccine at Walgreens. And again, the Johnson & Johnson. So I'm like, okay. So anyway, and I got the first dose last week. I got the Pfizer. So I should be going. So I'll be going back at the beginning of April 1st, to get my second shot, and I'm looking forward to riding down through Waco to go to McLean's Stadium to get it, because downtown Waco is, while a traffic nightmare, it's quite lovely to look at. So anyway, BookTube, I'm starting to ramble, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. So next week, I want to do a discussion video about my obsession with tracking the mail, because I do have an obsession with tracking the mail. Quite a lot of the time when I'm a bit neurotic, it's probably because I have packages coming in and it's just taking a little bit too much time. And of course, I also always complain during the book hauls. And then I'll probably do some tags because there are some tags I want to get to. And then, of course, there'll be weekly reads. And I think I'm going to hold off on this month's book haul until the end of March. So another week and some. So I would do it like the 31st. So anyway, BookTube, until next week, thank you, have a great weekend, and stay safe.